Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Everyone here and those of you online. Inshallah, we are approaching Qurban Eidul Adha this Friday. Will be the Eid prayer, inshallah. I thought I should do something on the significance of the Qurban because it's the relevant week. And next Monday, we will not have a sohbet next Monday because of the 4 days of Qurban, and we'll continue the following week, inshallah. So, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafi khalqis sayyidul anam Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم سبحانك لا فهم لنا إلا ما فهمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي وأفوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد. So inshallah I will look at this Qurban issue mainly from Bediüzzaman Said Nursi's perspective. I gathered some of the information from the Risale-i Nur. He addresses this topic in a few different books. So, inshallah, I will relate that to you. Qurban, let me just remove this. Okay. So, Qurban as the symbol of ultimate submission. Qurban means adha in Arabic. It means to sacrifice an animal, as you know, during this period, which we call, the period of adha. It sort of coincides with the Hajj period, as you know. So what is the significance of Qurban, sacrificing an animal? Qurban reflects the soul's surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The story of Prophet Ibrahim's willingness to sacrifice his son with the idea of sacrificing one's ego, nafs, and personal desires for the sake of divine love. As you know, the famous incident when Abraham was put through a test. I think it was one of the biggest tests you can ever imagine. He was commanded to sacrifice his son, his own beloved son, Ismail. And as the story goes, he always wanted a son. And during his du'as, when he, beseeched for son or pleaded to Allah for a son, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to him, he said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I will sacrifice the most beloved thing to me if you give me a son. That was his dua. So when he received a son, then he saw a dream in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, gave him revelation or ilham, and the dream said, fulfill your promise. And then he went and he started slaughtering how many animals, sacrifice, he's sacrificing from his wealth. But he kept on seeing the same dream again, 3 days in a row, as I remember. And after that, he realized, it was Ismail, his own son, he was supposed to sacrifice. So as you know the story, he took his son, and his son asked about it, and he explained. And he was a prophet too, as you know. Later on, he becomes a prophet. And Ismail said, if it's the will of Allah, do what you must do, Dad. And as you know, the knife wouldn't cut him, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a sacrificial ram in place of him. But Ibrahim's, promise or his test was quite severe. Allah had tested him and he passed the test. That was the main objective there. So there was another reason for that as well. During the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, there was people who were worshipping idols. Idolatry was very popular. And every year, they used to sacrifice a child, a human being, for their idols. It was a horrific, custom they had. And this was in a way to abolish that custom as well, that you cannot take the life of a human being. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends a ram, a sheep, instead of that sacrifice. So people learn about that as well. In the Risale-i Nur, Bediüzzaman Said Nursi says, sacrifice is the giving up of something loved for something more loved. That's what sacrifice means. This is in the letters. This passage frames sacrifice as a spiritual transaction, letting go of the worldly attachments for the sake of gaining nearness, proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It comes from the term qurb, qurb, qarib. It means closeness. So qurban comes from there, the term. So it is done with the aim of getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The external act of sacrificing an animal is thus symbolic for an inner process, the slaughter of selfishness and material attachment. So that's what you're really doing there. It's symbolic. The external, the process itself is symbolic, but in reality, you are slaughtering your selfishness and material attachment to this world. Qurban reflects the divine names and wisdom as well, according to Nursi. In the 23rd word, Bediüzzaman states that everything in creation reflects the divine names and that sacrifices too are mirrors to Allah's names such as Al-Razzaq, the provider, Al-Rahim, the compassionate, and Al-Hakim, the wise. So the act of sacrificing an animal includes, because everything is really in reality reflecting the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that act of sacrifice is also like a mirror which reflects the names of Allah, and some of them he mentioned here, Razzaq, Rahim, and Hakim. The animals being sacrificed are like guests of the all-compassionate one in this world. They're like guests. They fulfill their duties in this world and then transformed into sustenance for mankind. So their creation is for that purpose. This explanation emphasizes the purposeful nature of existence. Animals created for Qurban fulfill a divine function, just as humans do. Their sacrifice is not cruelty, but a harmonious submission to the greater plan of the divine wisdom and sustenance. Sometimes we have these people, vegans, animal rights and things like that. You see it on YouTube and various places. They even during Qurban, they appear a lot for some reason. Throughout the year, millions of, sheep, cattle already are slaughtered. Because, when you look at here too in Australia, you look around, all these McDonald's, Hungry Jacks, all of them full of meat, Meat is slaughtered all the time. That's one of the sustenance of humanity. It's a reality. But for some reason, this their soft spot appears or prevails during Qurban. They come out, they say, oh, you shouldn't be killing animals and things like that. I think it's an act against faith and religion. It's nothing to do with, protecting the animals. There are many research you can look at in regards to this. Like, for example, what would happen, if those animals were not slaughtered? That's the way life is. We live in a closed system. We're not in an open system. This planet is closed. Everything happens on this planet, on the surface of this planet. There are millions and millions of different animals and things on this world, yeah? And for them to survive, they hunt each other as well. So that balance, ecological balance can occur just because of your tiny compassion. which is not even a drop of water next to the, Atlantic Ocean or Pacific Ocean, next to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's infinite mercy, infinite compassion. You come out and you say, that shouldn't be done, it's cruel. But the reality is, without that, the world cannot balance. Some animals have to prey on other animals to feed their young as well, so that balance could continue. It's a reality. And just imagine if that didn't happen. Just think of the, oceans, the sea. If the fish did not, feed on each other, what would happen to the oceans? Fish multiply in the millions. Think about it. There would be no oceans left. Keep on multiplying, keep on multiplying. It will be horrific. No one can survive. So that balance has to be there. It's perfect, perfectly balanced, isn't it? Yeah, that's what is needed. Yeah, yeah. So their sacrifice is part of that greater plan of divine wisdom and sustenance. It's not a cruelty. Another dimension of Qurban is it is the inner and outer dimensions. There are two dimensions there as well, inner and outer dimensions. Every act of worship has an outer shell and an inner shell, inner meaning. Bediüzzaman says, outer shell is zahiri, inner means batini. So when you do a type of worship, no matter what it is, it has two sides to it. One is the outer shell, the other one is the inner meaning. Zahiri, batini. While the outward aspect of the Qurban is the physical slaughter of an animal sacrifice, its real essence lies in the inner purification. In the letters, Bediüzzaman Said Nursi says, the essence of worship is sincerity. What is the essence of worship? It's sincerity. And turning towards Allah with the heart. The form is like a shell, the outer form. The spirit is sincerity and intention. So what makes a worship valuable is your intention and sincerity. The rest is like a shell. They're symbolic, like a ritual. Therefore, according to Bediüzzaman, sacrificing without understanding or sincerity is a hollow ritual, nothing but a hollow ritual. That is why, no matter which worship you do, there are people whose maybe heads, go to the sajda position every day more than what is required, but maybe their prayers are not even accepted without intention, good intention, and sincerity. That is why it's important. Those two things are the key to worship. While even a simple act done with deep awareness and for the love of Allah carries immense spiritual weight. So sometimes you might do something very simple, a little act. You might do it with such an ikhlas, sincerity, that it might carry a great, immense spiritual weight. So because we don't know how things are calculated. Yes, just like when you're studying in a university or in another school, you have that assessment thing, that's how you're assessed. You have, for every, let us say, assessment, you have a certain value, marks. Percentage, yeah, and then those percentages are added up at the end, and you get a total, and you get, either you fail, you get pass, credit, DI, HD, it depends how you did. So this life is like that too. We are constantly being tested, and every act of worship we do, or everything that we do wrong, sins that we commit, they all have certain values, mathematical values. But with some of them, we don't know the value. Like, for example, when you recite the Quran, every letter has 10 rewards. Every letter. Everything is calculated by the angels. But there are certain things like fasting. Even angels doesn't know what to write. Maybe Qurban is like that too. We don't know. Allah knows our hearts, our intention, and our sincerity. So intention, which is niyyah in Arabic, and sincerity is ikhlas. The value of any worship is tied to intention and sincerity, and this is evident in the following verse. The Quran says, "Their meat and their blood do not reach Allah, but it is your piety, which is taqwa, that reaches Allah." So what that means is Allah does not need your worship. That's the reality. Allah does not need you. Allah does not need anything because one of his names is Samed. Samed means he needs nothing. Everything needs him. He needs nothing. So if Allah does not have any need, why would he need your worship? So why does he keep on insisting that we worship him? It is for our own good. We benefit from it. Sometimes I get this question asked, because it's a theological question. They say, God who needs nothing, why does he, keep on saying that we need to worship him, we need to do these rituals and praise and things like that? I give them this analogy. You go to a doctor, you know, you have an illness or something like that, and doctor gives you a medicine and keeps on reminding you because it's important for your treatment. And the doctor says to you, remember, you must take this 3 times a day before meals. It's very important. He keeps on saying, and the guy turns to the doctor and says, well, you keep on insisting, man. Do you need me to take these things, medicine? The doctor will laugh at him. He will say, you need it, not me. I'm thinking about your health. It's for your benefit. So this is the reason why Allah keeps on insisting within the Quran. It is for our own good. So their meat, the sacrificial meat or blood, does not reach Allah, but it's your piety, your taqwa that reaches. When you do that act of worship, that's what reaches him, if you're doing it with sincerity. So what reaches Allah is not the outer form, as someone explained before, the shell, but the taqwa, which is the inner form, batini, and sincerity hidden within it. This reinforces the idea that Qurban is not merely an economic or social tradition. So it's not just a ritual, like economical or social tradition, but a conscious act of devotion wherein the believer offers not only the animal, but his heart or her heart, intentions, and ego to his Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, Qurban and social justice, mercy and brotherhood. So, see how many different aspects it has. Just one act of sacrificing an animal, Eid al-Adha. How many aspects? In the 22nd word and in the 30th flash, Bediüzzaman explores how Islamic worship strengthens social bonds. Qurban is a clear example of this. Its meat is shared with the poor and the community, demonstrating that the unity and compassion Islam encourages. So that's one of the reasons too, when you slaughter an animal, as you know, you share it, with the community, in particular with the poor. And I know that, we send a lot of qurbans from here to like our Australian relief organization. In the past, we had videos, they may still have them, like Australian relief organization. Sometimes they take people there to witness being slaughtered. People have gone to Vietnam, Bangladesh, various other places. with the RO team. And there were some videos that I saw. Amongst those videos, our friends went from here. People were lining up. Apparently, some of them, not even maybe 100 grams of meat went into their stomachs for 2, 3 years. And I saw one footage. It was an old man, like 80 years old or something. He got a handful of meat like this, and his eyes were, lighted up. He's looking at it like this, and he's taking it. So with us, we don't realize it in a country like this. Meat is everywhere for us. In fact, we get sick of it, to be honest. But we have so much. But this is what Islam encourages, sharing with others. So Qurban is a very clear example here. Its meat is shared with the poor and the community, demonstrating the unity and compassion that the religion encourages, the deen encourages. Again, in the flashes, 30th flash, fifth point, Bediüzzaman Said Nursi says, Islam is the religion of mercy. In it, even the act of sacrificing an animal is filled with compassion and spiritual meaning. Because if you look at the Quran, almost all of the surahs in the Quran begin with Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, except for one of them, Surah Tawbah, as I remember. And the Bismillah passes in the following surah inside of it. But all of the surahs, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most merciful and compassionate. Every time we recite the Quran, we begin with that because Quran is the religion of mercy, and the noble Prophet ﷺ is a prophet of compassion. And we see this through his life with the Prophet ﷺ. And his compassion is not just with the humans, with the animals, with the environment. With everything, he was very compassionate. So Qurban is like a training in empathy. It is like we're training our empathy, developing our empathy. By giving to others, one weakens selfishness. By giving to others, one weakens selfishness and becomes more aware of the ummah's needs, or the people's needs. This also reflects the Prophet's emphasis on feeding the hungry and caring for the less fortunate, particularly during the Eid al-Adha. So, as you can see, there are many, aspects to sacrificing an animal. It is not just, sharing meat. It has many different, reasons behind it. And one of them is we are weakening our selfishness by giving. It's teaching us to give. And also, we become aware of the people's needs. We don't just think about ourselves. This also reflects the noble Prophet ﷺ emphasis on feeding the hungry and caring for the less fortunate. And that's how our Prophet was, ﷺ. Ethical and compassionate treatment of animals. Although Qurban involves in the taking of life, because you are slaughtering a sheep, a ram, or cattle, Islamic slaughter still requires a humane treatment. Islam mandates using a sharp knife, minimizing the animal's suffering, and invoking Allah's name. Bediüzzaman sees this not just as a formality, but as evidence of divine mercy operating even during death. It is divine mercy even during death. In the flashes, he says, the compassion shown in the slaughter of an animal proves that Islam is a mercy to all creatures. Üstad interprets this, Bediüzzaman, practices as reminders that humans are only trustees over animals. They have no absolute ownership of them. This aligns with the broader principle that all beings are created for a purpose. And death itself is not annihilation, but a transformation within divine wisdom. It is a transformation. Death is not the end, complete end. In fact, from a scientific perspective, you can never send anything into non-existence anyway. There is no such a thing. Whether living or non-living, you cannot send any matter into non-existence. It will only change form. Its molecules will change. If you burn something, it will become, ash. It will become, fumes. Its only molecular structure will change. You can never put it into non-existence. Because we know this, in the universe, we know that there's a certain amount of matter and certain amount of energy. It doesn't increase, it doesn't decrease. It's conservation of energy. You can't add into it, create energy. Just transform. You cannot create energy or you cannot destroy energy. You cannot put it into non-existence. The matter converts into energy. Energy converts into matter. E equals mc squared. Yes. So death is not, going into non-existence. It is not disappearing for eternity, infinity. It's just transformation. And it occurs within divine wisdom. Qurban is also a reminder of death and the afterlife. Ahiret. So Bediüzzaman looked at it from many, many different perspectives. Just, slaughtering an animal, many different perspectives he approached it. In the 10th word, which deals with the resurrection, وَالْبَعْثُ بَعْدَ الْمَوْتِ, Bediüzzaman uses the imagery of transformation and sacrifice to show that death is not the end, an end, but a means to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The sacrifice of an animal mirrors this reality because its life ends, but it continues to serve as a purpose, for example, as food, charity, and worship. And he says the death of a being created with wisdom is not futility, but a transformation, a transfer to another duty. So the duty of that being, living being, ends there, but it starts serving as another duty. In this way, Qurban becomes a mediation on our own mortality, meditation on our mortality, we meditate, and reminder that like the sacrificial animal or like the sacrificed animal, we too will return to our Lord. It reminds something to us. And you can look at it from another aspect too. When those animals, they are Mubarak animals, sheep, cow, because they feed humanity. When you look at for example, a cow, it eats grass, nothing but grass. Think about it. And drinks water, that's all. And then it gives you milk, it gives you its, leather, it gives you meat, same as the thing, sheep. We call them Mubarak, sacred animals, really, when you think about it. Allah created them for that purpose, so they can feed us. But look at the life cycle there. When they eat the grass, You know, the grass is dead, yeah, because they uprooted from its roots. It goes into their stomachs. It gets processed. It becomes the part of their body, flesh. And then we slaughter the animal. We eat their flesh. Their flesh goes into our bodies, turns into blood, you know, bones and flesh in our bodies. So in a way, the animal has raised or risen its thing, rank. It's going to a higher stage of life. From being an animal, it became part of a human being. So the cycle continues. They don't disappear. They don't go into non-existence. There we are, especially during Qurban. So it is also the act, the ritual is also a reminder that, like those animals, we will return to our Lord as well. Either way, because the Quran says, "Kulli nefsin dha'iqatul maut." Al-mautu haqqun. Death is the truth. Every soul shall taste death. Not just humans, animals, everything. So if you did not slaughter, sacrifice that animal, it was going to die anyway. For the life cycle to continue, it's going to happen. It's a reminder for us. So sacrifice and ego, the nafs of a human being, a spiritual battle. A major theme in the flashes and the letters in the Risale-i-Nur is the struggle against the ego, nafs. You might remember a hadith when the Prophet ﷺ with his army was returning from a battle. As he entered Medina, he said, we are coming from the big jihad, so small jihad to the big jihad, lesser jihad to greater jihad. Jihad means struggle, striving. And one of the Sahabi says, what could be bigger than, fighting in the battlefield? He said, fighting with your own nafs desires, your egos. That's the reality, isn't it? It's more difficult. So Bediüzzaman Said Nursi sees the ego, the nafs, as the barrier between the soul and divine light, nur. It is a barrier between our ruh and divine light, the nur. Sacrificing an animal symbolizes a greater inner act. It means you're conquering the self. So it is a struggle between your own nafs. Brother Abdul does that very easily. I only sacrifice, one animal in my life. Did it once. The rest of these, I always give the money for, someone else to sacrifice. But myself, I only did it once because it's sunnah. That's why I had to do it once. But I can't do it. Yeah, myself. Yeah, myself, yeah. Bediüzzaman says, the nafs always seeks to make itself a lord. So human nafs assumes in its mind some sort of a lordship in itself. It thinks it's like a rab. It can do whatever it wants. But the Quran teaches it to be a servant. The Quran says, no, you're not a lord, you're a servant. By confronting and symbolically sacrificing one's selfishness, pride, and attachments, the believer grows spiritually. Thus, Qurban functions as an annual training in spiritual humility. It is an annual training in spiritual humility. It also reminds that by sacrificing an animal, we are being selfishness goes away from it. We are not selfish. We are removing our pride and arrogance and other attachments that come with it. So the mu'min grows, the believer grows in spirituality. So Qurban we can think of it as a multi-dimensional act. It's a multi-dimensional act. Bediüzzaman Said Nursi interprets Qurban not merely as a ritual, but as an act rich in meaning. It includes total submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's called ubudiyya. So by performing Qurban, you are actually submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is a form of worship. It's called ubudiyya. The second one is reflecting the divine names and cosmological mercy. Reflecting the divine names, because as we mentioned before, all those names are reflected within that act of worship, and cosmological mercy. Because even when you are slaughtering an animal, there's rules there, so you don't mistreat the animal. You make sure it happens in a certain way very quickly without, much pain. It helps the believer overcome his or her ego and pride as well. Promotes sincerity, social responsibility, and compassion. Promotes sincerity, social responsibility, because it is a social responsibility to slaughter or sacrifice an animal every year. And compassion for others, to others who cannot eat, others who live in poverty. It reminds a human being of mortality and the afterlife, because all living creatures are basically made up of the same stuff, same genetic material. There's only very small differences between them. Last night, someone messaged me through X, Twitter, from DM, direct messaging, and asked me a question about the Neanderthals. Neanderthals. And he asked me, he said, Hocam, they have 0.3% similarity to human beings. So where does this put Adem alayhi salam? Asking a question. I have so many questions coming through social media. I keep on answering them. Like in the future, I'm thinking of getting all those answers together, making a book. It would be good. So much answers, I think. And are they a different species? He's asking. Neanderthals, Homo sapiens, Neanderthals. I said, look, the term Neanderthals, I said, it's just a name, a title given by evolutionists to, evaluate that species as a non-human species or something close to human or something like that, but as a different species. Whereas if you look at their thing, they're humans. Neanderthals are humans, it's just a title given to them. I said genetic difference of 0.3, you think that's something significant. But today, every human being on Earth, different, societies, different nations have 0.1% differences in their DNA anyway. We are, one people who live, let us say, in Europe, and a community lives in United States, they have different DNAs. There's differences. In fact, people who live in the Saharan desert and people who live in the East Asia has 0.2% difference in their DNA. Do we call them different species? No. Humans. Neanderthals are human too. And at the bottom of the thing line, when you think about it, we are related to all creatures on Earth because we're all made up of the same stuff. I remember when I did a talk in Melbourne University some years ago, it was based on evolution, the theory of evolution. On it, I did a presentation too. And I said, look, resemblance of DNA We call that in science homology. They base a lot of things on that, because our DNA is very close to this. Maybe we came from this animal, like chimpanzee are relatives to us and things like that. I said there, look, resemblance does not mean that. It doesn't prove. Yeah, yeah. Bananas, 50%. We have resemblance, 50%. There's a type of cat, 92% similar to human beings. Mouse, 92% as well. Very close to. Why? Because we're all made up of the same stuff. Allah created us from the same materials. He just coded our DNAs in a different way. That's all. So, does resemblance mean we have a common ancestor, or does it mean we have a common designer? Which one makes more sense? Common designer makes more sense, doesn't it? Yeah. So at the end of the day, since we are all related, I'm talking about animalistic side from a materialistic side. We are related to all creation on earth. Their death is also a reminder to us that we are mortal as well. And we are going to die as well. It's a reminder, isn't it? So that's important too. So Qurban as a multidimensional act, by connecting the physical and metaphysical, individual and social, outer and inner dimensions of sacrifice, Bediüzzaman Said Nursi situates Qurban at the heart of Islamic spirituality and ethics. He looks at it very differently, as you can see. Not just an act of sacrificing and distributing the meat, but he looks at it as spirituality and ethics. The noble Prophet ﷺ has sacrificed an animal during Eid al-Adha throughout his life. He always sacrificed an animal. Hadith reports state that it was 2 rams in general. He used to sacrifice 2 rams. However, he himself, with his own hands, sacrificed an animal during the Hudaybiyah incident, and the farewell Hajj. Some reports say during Hudaybiyah he slaughtered 70 animals at once himself, and 2 rams during farewell Hajj, only 2 occasions. But after that, reports indicate that he gave Hazreti Ali wakale. So Hazreti Ali was sacrificing qurbans on his behalf. He didn't do it himself. He only did it twice in his life. That's the way the reports say. In fact, some people may approach this as a cruelty, think, oh, there are people like that. As you know, Qurban, sacrificing an animal, is sunnah, it's sunnah-i müekkede, emphasize sunnah, in the Maliki, Shafi, and Hanbali schools. But in the Hanafi school, it's wajib. Must be done. It's necessary. Because if you abandon sunnah, there is no punishment. But if you abandon wajib, there is punishment. So Hanafis have to sacrifice. But even in that situation, there is an incident. One day, this man, this Sahabi, companion, comes to the noble Prophet ﷺ and says, "O Messenger of Allah, my compassion doesn't allow me to slaughter this animal." He couldn't do it. He can't do it. You know what the Prophet said? Your rewards have been doubled. One for Allah has counted it as you have slaughtered it. The other one for showing compassion to that animal. That's the Prophet. So, inshallah, I'll conclude there. Someone is showing me the time. Everyone have a, inshallah, Eid Mubarak, I should say, from now on. There's few more days until Friday, but may Allah accept your Eid prayers, and may Allah accept your Qurbans, and may Allah make this a spiritual, enhancement for our souls, this sacrificial act. تقبل منا بحرمة الفاتحة.